What's up guys? So on my channel I've posted about 20 videos so far, and some of you have reached out to me to ask me how I became an aerospace engineer. So to ask me some of these questions I brought on my lovely wife Katie, and she's going to ask some of those questions for you.
Alright, so to start off, I think it would make the most sense to start from the beginning. So how did you first get interested into aerospace?
So my dad was actually a pilot in the Navy, and so I grew up around naval air stations pretty much my whole childhood, and so that's really what got me interested in aviation to begin with. I originally wanted to be a pilot, but I don't have perfect vision with both eyes individually. So the military requires that you have perfect vision in both eyes, which I don't. So unfortunately that dream was crushed. So basically I can't do that. So as a consolation to that, I thought, well, maybe I can do engineering, and I thought, well, maybe I can do civil engineering or something. I enjoyed doing CAD and things like that. But then I decided I didn't want to build roads for the rest of my life, so I didn't want to be a civil engineer either. And I had a series of less than stellar math teachers in high school, which really turned me off from math. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I still like the design aspect. So I went to school for architecture, actually, where I went for my first year at Auburn. And then I went on my mission trip. So I went on a mission trip to Brazil for 2 years. And there I got some perspective on life. I decided I could really make a better impact on the world if I decided to follow my passions, which was aerospace, of course.
I know that it's not ideal that you don't have perfect vision, that you didn't get to become a pilot.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I know. But I really enjoy the 9-to-5 aspect of your job. Okay, so you mentioned that you started out in architecture at Auburn, right?
Yep.
And then once you came home from Brazil, you decided to change majors to become an aerospace engineer.
Yep.
So I would imagine that took you on a different course when it came to classes, planning for that, maybe even where you went to college, right?
Right, exactly. So architecture doesn't require a lot of math. Obviously engineering does. And since I was working when I came back from my mission, I decided I would go to community college so I could afford tuition much easier. And so I went to community college up in Jacksonville, and that's where I got my AA. And then I decided I could take that AA and transfer to a bigger school with an actual aerospace engineering program. And that's what I ended up doing. And I transferred to the University of Central Florida for aerospace engineering.
And it could probably be helpful here to talk about the two schools that you really applied to, that you were accepted to, and maybe do you want to talk about why you decided University of Central Florida?
Yeah, so I accepted to two different schools for aerospace engineering, particularly UCF, like I said, and then there was another private school that I was accepted to. I looked at the private school, and basically what I found was I could pay $45,000 a year, go there for 4 years, end up in crazy amounts of debt, or I could go to UCF, which was way more affordable for basically the same amount of education, and there wasn't a big payoff difference at the end, so you weren't going to make more money by going to the private school. So I ended up going to UCF, which is a public school, and I think that was by far the better decision for me.
Yes, and I will say we were very happy with our financial decision to go to UCF and get degrees.
Yeah, I was actually able to pay all of our loans off. Was it 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 6 months after I started, which was great. Yes.
So, anyways, okay, so talking about your time at UCF, do you want to talk about any particular classes that stand out to you, maybe ones that were really exciting or really difficult? What advice would you give to someone that is about to start their degree in aerospace engineering?
What advice would I give? I think, to me, aerospace engineering as a degree at a college is kind of like a gauntlet. It really is a rite of passage. It sucks in a lot of ways, but it's so hard and so strenuous, and you don't have a life outside of school if you really go full-time.
You're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it.
And so I would say realize that an engineering degree is not a joke. You're not going to go to college and party for 4 years. It's just not going to happen, and you're not going to do well if you go into it that way. So I think being realistic about your expectations about going into an engineering degree, and also realizing that there is a payoff. It's a lot of work, but it's so worth it in the end. The jobs pay really well. The work is so much better than the school, in my opinion. As much as I did enjoy school, there's a lot of classes to get to the classes that I really enjoyed. Propulsion systems, for example. We spent an entire class talking about the SR-71 engines, and that was just bliss for me. I loved that so much. It was so cool to finally get to the point where you can actually understand the real science behind these things, but it's a lot of building blocks, and so you can get to that point.
Right. And you bring up a good point. You mentioned that you can't have too much of a life outside of your degree, right?
Yes.
Although I will say you worked your butt off. You had a job when you were going to that community college to get your prereqs, right?
Yep.
So maybe with some of the easier classes earlier on, you're able to work and do that kind of thing. But once you get into your harder classes, you decided to take a break from working so that you could really focus all of your energy into that.
Yeah, I did have friends that did work, but they would all take less classes. So they would take no more than 3 or 4 classes a semester. It took them longer, but they were also able to pay off all their school while they were going to school and not have any debt when they came out of school, which was also great for them.
And okay, so you mentioned a class that you really enjoyed. Any classes that you'd kind of give a warning about going into this degree?
At UCF, you are required to take what's called Principles of Electrical Engineering. Some places it's called Electrical Networks, but basically it's Electrical Engineering 101, and I do not have the mind for electrical engineering. It is such a foreign concept to me. For me, physics and mechanics, things like that, it comes just so much naturally, while electrical engineering it does not. It's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. It's hard.
I'm laughing because I've heard a lot of rants about this class, so.
It was a very difficult course for me with a physics-oriented mind to understand electrical engineering.
Now, I remember you complaining about a course called DiffEq, differential equations, early on, and that's something that every aerospace engineer is going to have to take. So.
Yes, so every aerospace engineer, you need to take Calc 1, 2, and 3, and then differential equations. Every aerospace engineering program in the country, I think, has to take that. Probably most engineering degrees actually also have to take that class. And it's just a very math-heavy class. I mean, I think it encompassed so much of math that it was kind of daunting for me. I mean, one problem is an entire page of work, and it's a lot to remember. And you're harping on all these math concepts from way back when. I mean, rules that you learned in Algebra 2 for like a week. For me, it was a long time ago. And so I'm trying to remember all these rules. And yeah, differential equations is hard. So basically, there's a lot of hard classes to even begin to get into the aerospace specific classes. And what I've noticed is these classes are hard, but they're hard for a reason. They're definitely a weed out class. When people talk about weed out classes, engineering has weed out years. And so there's like 2 years where you're getting weeded out before you even really get into your subject, before you're into aerospace engineering or anything specific to your degree, because you got to build those foundations. You need to know calculus, you need to know some differential equations to do some aerodynamics and things like that. So it's important, but it's hard. And I wish I could tell you that, once you get into your major, it's easier, but it's not.
No.
Also did not get easier. Every class kept getting harder and harder every semester, and you just have to know that and just get better at learning, honestly.
But there is light at the end of the tunnel. You eventually graduate.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it gets harder as you go further into your courses, but you also enjoy it more, which is a weird, almost sadistic thing. But so, like, you're getting harder classes and more content, and you're compiling all the information from your core classes and putting it into these courses now, but you're also enjoying it because hopefully you're enjoying it. If you're in the right major, you should be enjoying it because it's something that you've always wanted to do. that's how it was for me, I think.
So thinking now then about when you finally got to the very end, you graduated, you got your first job with your degree.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about the nature of that job? How did you use your degree in that job? Did you use your degree in that job?
Yes. So I want to preface this by saying it is not easy to find a job in aerospace engineering. It's a competitive field, especially at UCF, which is actually, UCF produces the most amount of aerospace engineering students of any school in the country. And so I was a small fish in a big pond, to say the least.
Do you want to mention how many jobs you ended up applying to?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I should say.
Well, I think it's good for people to know.
I applied to a lot of jobs. Let me just say that. But I did also, I was more proactive than most of my classmates, but I also got a job. So, some of them ended up not finding jobs, and at least right when they graduated. So I would say if you're in college now and you're in your senior year and you're going to graduate in the spring, start applying to jobs the semester before your last semester, because that's how long that these aerospace engineering companies need to vet people. There's a lot of security clearance issues. They need to verify your nationality and all these different things. Getting into an aerospace company is not as simple as a quick little background check that most companies require. Most of them will require you to get a clearance, which takes months. So they want you to have a clearance on day one. And so they hire much earlier than most majors and most careers even.
Because I remember you getting your call with your job offer in October, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I applied to my first job in aerospace engineering in September, I think, actually.
Might have been even earlier than that.
It was around that time. But it was September, and I had an interview in October, and they called me back a couple weeks and offered me the position, which was such a relief. It's so much better. Like I said, apply early because it's so much nicer to be able to focus in your classes knowing that you have a job when you graduate.
So what was the job?
So I was hired as a manufacturing engineer for a major aerospace manufacturer, a defense contractor. Can't really say which one, but it was a major defense contractor, which was basically a dream come true. I love this company. I love the aircraft that they manufactured, and so this was the perfect gig for me. I will say I wasn't thrilled about manufacturing as much as I was about the company, but I knew it was a good way to get my foot in the door, and it ended up being a good entry, I think.
Right. Now, you said that you weren't very thrilled about manufacturing. Did you get to use your degree a lot in manufacturing?
So that is one thing I'll say. I think a lot of engineers will agree that you're going to only use a very small portion of the things that you learned in the 4 or 5 years of school that you take in your actual job. Aerospace as an industry is gigantic, and there's so much that goes into building and manufacturing and producing a plane on large scales that your job is such a tiny little portion of what the airplane is. There's not one person that's going to draw and design and do all the calculations for a plane. You're just going to have a tiny little piece in it. And so I wish I had known that going into aerospace. I think I had an idea. I knew, obviously, not one person building an airplane by themselves, but I think I had no real concept of how vast the industry is and how many jobs go into every single aircraft that gets designed. For instance, my role as a manufacturing engineer was simply to take engineering designs, be able to translate them into layman's speak for the mechanical back shop.
So it's been 2 months. You
Yep.
have recently switched positions.
Yes.
You've gone to a new company. You have a new type of work that you're doing. So do you want to talk about that and the differences between those two positions?
So my role in my new position is in R&D, which is research and development. And so essentially it's not as much production as my last job was, where I was working as a tiny little piece in a project. And here I have more of a stake in the overall program. So I actually get to design aspects of the end product in CAD and be able to see it all the way through. Whereas most times you're not going to be able to see beginning to end of the life cycle for these big programs. Like the F-35, for instance. If you work on the F-35, you're going to be a tiny little piece. You're going to be either a manufacturing engineer, You can be like a systems engineer, making sure that it's going to perform to its requirements. There's so many different jobs that you can have in aerospace, but R&D is a really cool little niche field. There's not very many jobs in R&D, but if you do find a job in R&D, you get to really see more of your product than you would otherwise, I think.
Right, absolutely. And it's been really fun to watch him go from one position to the other, and both have been really great opportunities for you, right? Like you said, you loved the first company that you were with, but you really love what you're doing now.
Yes.
And the nature of the work is really fun and exciting. And just as a bystander, it's really fun to watch you come home and be excited and passionate about the work that you're spending so much of your time on.
Yeah, it's really, it can't be stated enough how much it really matters that you enjoy what you do. You know, you can clock into a 9 to 5 the rest of your life.
And for some people, that's fine, right?
Right, yeah. You know, a lot of people don't mind as much, but I think I would get too antsy at a 9 to 5. I mean, I've worked random jobs. I worked retail, and I've worked at an amusement park. I've had these little entry-level jobs, and to have a job that I actually really enjoy makes all the difference to me.
So there's probably many of you watching that are getting ready to go to college, considering a degree in aerospace engineering, thinking about what a career would be like, but taking it back to someone that hasn't even started their degree yet, what one piece of advice would you give to them to help set them up for success?
So one piece of advice I think that every aerospace engineering student should know going into college is to get engineering experience, whatever form that might be. It's so important that you're able to put some engineering experience on your resume. Because as crazy as it sounds, if you try to go out and get an internship as an engineer, they'll want engineering experiences on your resume already, which is crazy to ask for, but it's true. They want it. And so what you can do is you can join clubs. You can join clubs like AIAA or SAE. There's all these engineering organizations that are clubs at these schools that you can get engineering experience that you can actually put on your resume. And it's not paid, obviously, but it's definitely engineering experience. It counts. No one's going to complain that you don't have a paid job on your resume, but it's something you can definitely put on there, and you can leverage an internship, which is also so important when you're trying to find a job. If you've had some sort of internship or something with a big aerospace company, this will help you get a leg up. So I would say as soon as you start college, look into those organizations, get involved, go build a rocket, airplane, something. Like, even if you don't have any of these organizations at your school, you can either try to start one through your school, or you can actually do these projects. If you look at NASA, they're always doing projects that you can join and just submit your project to them, and that's something you can put on your resume, and you'll have something you can build a portfolio with and show potential employers in the future that you've done real engineering work applying the principles that you've learned in the classroom, because everyone that's applying for those jobs has a degree, and so you're not going to make yourself stand out unless you have real engineering experience.
And that's something really important to keep in mind from the very beginning, because you have these 4 years that you're going to be spending getting your degree. So you might as well, as much as you can, and especially in the earlier years where you have more free time, you might as well rack up the experience while you can.
Yeah, definitely. And those organizations are really good even to have leadership positions. So most of those organizations are small enough, you'll be able to have some leadership position, whether it's just a team leader or like a whole project leader. And those are great opportunities for your resume as well. And I think there's no way I would have gotten my job without those types of club organizations.
And the other thing to add is, while it definitely gives you experience while you're job hunting and gives you a leg up in that way, once you do get into the thick of your degree in years 3 and 4, once you're nearing towards the end and you just kind of hate everything and maybe want to give up a little bit, you have this outlet where you can be reminded of the fun and the excitement that aerospace can bring.
That's true. And it'll help you get through your first years as well, for that same reason. You're not going to be doing aerodynamics for 3 or 4 years. You're not going to be learning about propulsion systems or high-speed aerodynamics or any of the fun stuff. You're not going to be learning about that in classrooms. So it's cool to be able to actually apply the little amount that you do know and apply it to a real world scenario.
Well, I think that's the perfect piece of advice for anyone breaking into that industry. And if someone had further questions about your experiences or just wanted to ask advice about their own journey, how could they go about that?
Make sure you comment down below. If you have any questions, I'll be answering all of them down below. You can also follow me on Instagram. You can DM me your questions there or comment on any of my posts, and I'll be more than happy to answer all your questions about aerospace engineering as a degree and as a career. So if you like this video and you found it helpful, make sure you subscribe to Aviation Austin. And as always, Godspeed.